Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Henkel. I am here with the answers to practice and review for chapter 38. You can see that this is an older edition of the textbook when it was still called Practice and Review instead of Exercitationes. You'll also notice this is the Kindle version. It has a bunch of typos in it, like this. Hortati sumus is not a word. There's a couple things like that. So this is one of the reasons why I warn people not to use the electronic version of Wheelock, because it is riddled with errors as well as being hard to use. Anyway, I'm sorry about the mix up with work this morning, with class this morning. I never actually made it to class, to campus, and so that's why I'm using the electronic version to make this video right now instead of using the paper version. But here are the answers, and for tomorrow, let's go ahead and cancel the quiz. I don't think it'd be quite fair to give you a quiz on stuff that we hadn't had a day's worth of in-class work on. So tomorrow we'll carry on with the assignment that is meant for tomorrow, sententiae, etc. But we won't have a quiz. All right, so let's look at the practice and review questions here for chapter 38. Remember that this chapter we're talking about relative clauses of characteristic, the dative of reference, and supines. So, regi persuasi, I persuaded the king. Remember that persuadio takes a dative, so regi is this dative. And after that, we go into indirect command, rather. I persuaded the king that he give prizes, gifts, not gifts, I guess, prizes, more pleasing prizes, gratiora premia, to your sister and brother, tuo sorori fratrique, and that he give them libenter, freely. Persuasi is in the secondary sequence, so daret is the imperfect subjunctive in this indirect command. Number 2, deinde then, abea insula nave profecta. Profecta from proficiscor, this is a verb that I've told you is important for Caesar. It means to set out. It's deponent, so profecta looks like a perfect passive participle, but it's perfect active because proficiscor is deponent. So instead of meaning having been set out, it means having set out. So then, having set out, abea insula, from that island by means of a boat, ablative of means, they entered Athens, iniet Athenas. Athenas, the accusative place to which, so we could say entered to Athens. In English, we tend to use enter as a transitive verb, and so we could also say entered Athens. And here's our supine for purpose, visum. Remember, the accusative of the supine is used for purpose with verbs of motion, especially compounds of ao. So in ao here, entered, to see, visum, to see friends, amicos. All right, number 3 says, eam hortati sumus, sorry about the typo here, eam hortati sumus, ut ad caesarem sine timore accedere conorator. We encouraged him, hortor, hortari, again a deponent verb. It takes indirect command, starting with the ut here down through conorator. We encouraged him that he try, conorator, to approach to Caesar ad Caesarem without fear, sine timore. Again, hortati sumus in the secondary sequence, so conorator is an imperfect subjunctive. Number 4, soliti sunt, from soleo solere, to be accustomed. Soliti sunt, remember that soleo solere is it is semi-deponent. So the perfect system is deponent while the present system is active. Soliti sunt, they were accustomed. To believe, cratere takes a dative, here's our dative, to believe that man, he. And after that, we've got a relative clause that's full of subjunctives. Serviret, sequerator, superaret. And we just learned about relative clauses that use the subjunctive. These are relative clauses of characteristic. Instead of telling us a specific fact about that man, it's giving us a tendency. So we say, we were accustomed to believe him the sort of man who serves philosophy, who follows virtue, and who overcomes his desires, kupidanes. So we can smooth that out by just subsuming the AE inside the qui here. We could say, we were accustomed to believe the sort of man who, AE qui, serves philosophy, follows virtue, and overcomes his desires. Number 5, sapiens nos orat ne viris sententiarum adversarum nocearum. The wise man begs us. Now we're into to indirect command again, but it's negative. So ne instead of ut. So he begs us that we not harm, noceamus, men, viris, noceo takes a dative, here viris, of adversarum sententiarum, of opposing thoughts, of opposing sentiments. So we should not hurt people because they disagree with us politically, philosophically, etc. Note here that oro orare, this is present tense, so when we're in the primary sequence instead of the secondary sequence. And in the primary sequence, you use the present subjunctive down here. Number 6 says, in illis terris non licet literis bonis verisque studere, ut sub turno saepe fit. Debes igitur exire et peregrinare. Peregrinari, excuse me. So in those lands, non licet, it was not permitted. It is not permitted, currently, present tense. Studere takes a dative, so it is not permitted to study, to give our enthusiasm to good literature, good and true literature. Literis bonis verisque. Remember that literi in the plural can mean a letter, or it can mean literature. Ut here, when it occurs with the indicative, usually means as. So as often happens under a tyrant. You ought, therefore, to go out and travel abroad, peregrinari. Number 7, queremus. Queremus ne civitatem eis tradamus, qui se patriae anteponant. Queremus here from curo curare, it's first conjugation, so this e means that it's present subjunctive. Let us take care. We'll say it's adjussive subjunctive. And curo curare takes indirect command. Here it's negative. So let us take care that we not, or sorry, that we not, tradamus, that we not hand over the state, civitatem, to those men, eis. Here we've got a subordinate clause, and antepono, anteponere, third conjugation. This e means that it is subjunctive. So we've got another characteristic clause. Let us take care that we not hand over the state to the sort of men who put, anteponant, say themselves, ante patriae, put themselves before the state. Remember that compound verbs like antepono, usually the root verb, pono ponere, takes an accusative, say, and the preposition, ante, takes a dative, patriae. So the sort of men who, qui, ponere, put themselves, accusative, ante, before patriae, the state here in the dative, the country, the fatherland. Number 8, sunt infirmi qui levia opera mirenter et semper sibi ignoscant. Sunt at the beginning of a sentence, oftentimes we call this sunt or est at the beginning of a sentence. We often call it the existential est. That is to say, it tells us that something exists, and we translate it by saying there is or there are. So there are infirmi, weak men, who mirenter opera levia, miro mirari, so it's first conjugation, and that e means that we're looking at A present subjunctive. So again, this is a relative clause of characteristic. There are weak men of the sort who wonder at light deeds and always forgive themselves. Ignoscant sibi. Remember, ignoscere takes that dative. Relative clauses of characteristic often follow verbs of existence. So if you're saying these people exist, then it's common to need to use a relative clause of characteristic after them because the assumption is that they otherwise don't. And relative clauses of characteristic are used frequently with categories of people that don't exist or categories of people that you're having to assert exist. Number 9, iste dux diu absens, tam stultis conciliis civitati udebatur, ut milia civium adversa pati cogerentur, atque multi boni perirent. That leader, that general, remember iste has a pejorative force. Long absent, diu absens, absent for a long time. And then our main verb is udebatur, was making use of, and utor takes the ablative, was making use of tam stultis conciliis, such foolish plans, making use of them for the state, or we could call this a dative of perspective, dative of reference, and say from the perspective of the state. But tam, as often, starts a result clause. So plans that were so foolish that ut milia civium adversa pati cogerenter, that they forced cogerenter thousands of citizens, milia civium, to pati, to suffer adverse things, to suffer negative effects, to suffer opposing things. And multi boni perirent, many good men died. So we've got utor taking an ablative, stultis conciliis. Probably civitati is dative of indirect object. So he was using such foolish plans for the state. That result clause. They forced thousands of citizens to suffer adverse things, and many good men died. Haec locutus is another example of a deponent verb where what looks like a perfect passive participle, locutus, is in fact perfect active. So having spoken these things, having said these things. Phasis est, another deponent verb, he admitted, phasis est, that, we go into indirect discourse here. So accusative subject, illos, that those men, we've got a subordinate clause here, a relative clause, qui odium emotum erga civitatem multos annos habebat. But I just want you to look over that for a minute and read past the subordinate clause to the rest of the indirect statement. So the indirect statement is illos Romae interfectos esse. So we've got our subject, illos, in the nominative. Then we've got interfectos esse, our verb in the infinitive, Romae at Rome, in the locative. So he admitted, phasis est, he confessed that those men, illos, interfectos esse, had been killed at Rome. Which men? Those men who were having, habebat, used to have, hatred, unmoved towards the state, accusative of duration of time, for many years. So, having said these things, he admitted that those men who used to have hatred unmoved towards the state for many years had been killed at Rome. Just a few more left. Number 11, in etiam operis nos saepe impedit. The beginning of the work often impedes us. Here, nos is the accusative object of impedit. Number 12, sator sublimis hominum atque animalium, omnibus nobis animas dedit. There's another typo. There should only be one A there. Cum corpora obeant, animae numquam morienter. The sower, sator, means somebody who plants a seed. So this is a very vivid metaphor here. The sower, the heavenly sower, Sublimis means on high. The heavenly sower of men, genitive, homonym, and animals, another genitive, animalium, gave souls, animos, to nobis omnibus, all of us. Cum clause here, cum plus the subjunctive, obeant. When our bodies perish, obeant, die, animae numquam morienter, our souls never, morio morire, morienter is the future, our souls never will die. I'm sorry, it's morio or mori. Yeah. But still, this is the future. The E here is the sign of the future. Our souls never will die. Last one, number 13. Cum rus rediamus, tum domi invenemus, mirabile visu, plurimos amicos. Cum clause here at the beginning, but it takes an indicative. Remember, cum clauses with the indicative are always when. So when we, perfect tense, returned, rus, accusative place to which? To the country. Then we found, domi, place where, at home, so that's the locative. Plurimos amicos, very many friends, accusative. Object of invenemus, is plurimos amicos. And then we have our supine in the ablative. Mirabile visu, wondrous to see. So when we returned home, then we found, when we returned to the country, then we found at home, wondrous to see, very many friends. Okay, I'm not going to put the workbook up because I don't have the workbook here with me at home, but here is the stuff for the exercitationes, and we'll do the sententiae and whatever else is on the syllabus tomorrow in class. And I'll tell you the story of my car troubles. Okay, take care. I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.